started with our second speaker, Duvall, our Economic Development Planning and Building Director of the City of Radcliff. JJ began his career public service when he ran for office at the age of 26. For Radcliff City Council, he served 2 terms as city councilman before being elected mayor. During his time in city council, he strived to listen to the people and voted accordingly. His enthusiasm and love for the city of Radcliff runs deep due to his family's long history within this community. At the age of 31, he was elected to the position of mayor, serving 1 term. Presently, JJ serves as the Economic Development Planning and Building Director for the City of Radcliff. JJ is a small business owner. He is a state-certified master electrician and contractor. He's married to Susan Lewis and has 3 children, Hannah and sons Cameron and Luke, and has a German Shepherd named Ramona. She did not name. Who named her? I would like to present to you JJ Duvall. Thank you.
Well, I want to just take a moment. Please give Mayor Mike Weaver another round of applause. You always give credit. I've learned in this business very quickly that you always give credit to people that either A, write your check, or B, that tell you what to do. So also adding to that, I want to thank Terry Short, Councilman Short. Where's Yates? Councilman Yates. He's back there talking to Councilman Palmer, Councilman Holmes, Councilman Kim Thompson. Thank you all for being here. And Stan, thank you for bringing your bow tie with you. You got to teach me because I'm trying to. I got the one that put them on. I can't do much with it. Thank you all so much for having me here. Mayor Weaver actually covered a lot of what I was going to speak about, and the knowledge. When Mayor actually presented this, probably back in December, the council at the time felt like this position was strong. It was a position that was much needed. We were fortunate enough in this field to have our current, or at the time, the current building official, which was Dale Painter, was going to retire, and so that left a vacancy open. Dale's pay and my pay were almost the same, and it was about a $2,500 difference between what I currently make and what the senior building official at that time made. So with that, there was a huge savings, a potential $65,000 savings, if I'm not mistaken. And so with the council support and approval, that was able to happen. And so here we are today. I'm going to go through, this is the budget. I hate to bore some of the council members with this. Some of them have already seen it. But I'm going to touch base real fast on some of the things that the mayor's already spoke about. This is just a little agenda. I'm going to move on. Economic development, as the mayor said, back in August of 25th, North Hardin Economic Development Authority was dissolved. And when we say dissolved, 25th of August is when the council actually made the resolution to dissolve that board. That was an agreement that was made currently, by the past chairman, Mike Weaver, and myself to do that. And September 19th is when we actually took back and reverted back to the city, and that's where we paid off the $66,000 of debt, and that money was taken out of reserves to pay for, so to pay for that debt. Let me do this so I don't have to keep turning around. The position of economic director was hired back in January and subsequently merged with the planning and building department with the retirement of the senior building official. The department currently has 7 members of staff. This is how when the mayor came in, one thing that we haven't had in the past, and that goes back not only to me, can you, Mayor?
You supposed to turn your phone. I'm turning your phone off.
But at the time, we never had flow charts, or we didn't have charts that everybody kind of understood. And one thing with the mayor's background, he came in and said, look, we need flow charts to make sure that we have our job descriptions up to date. And this is my flow chart for my department. As you can see, the planning director is grade 10. It drops down to the building official, which is currently Jeremy Merle. Jeremy Merle is a level 3 inspector. Those that don't understand the inspecting codes, the state always had jurisdiction in our community. So for instance, the North Hardin, remodel that's going on currently, that would actually, if we didn't have the level 3 inspector, would actually be taken care of by the state. To give you an example, that's about $19,000 in building permits that we don't receive from the city that actually goes to the state. Well, because we now have a level 3 building inspector, we receive that $19,000, which of course helps our line item in our budgets. But Jeremy is a level 3 building official. We have our planning official, which is Murray Warner. Murray's been with us about 15 years. Then the administrative assistant, which drops straight down. The reason for that is not only does she report to the building official and the planning official, but she also reports directly to me. That is Denise Haynes. Many of y'all probably know Denise. Denise has been with us about 15, 16 years. Then you have the building inspector, which is a commercial inspector. That's a grade 5, which is Danny Richardson. Then you have the code enforcement, which I know you all will talk about here in just a few minutes. That is Ron Peak. And then the senior, the certified permits technician and administrator, ADC clerk, is Ashley Russo. The economic development budget, this is the budget that's projected this year, what's proposed. It's $561,200. That is actually down this year, probably about $50,000, because we used to have the engineering department. The salary came out of this department. We actually moved that into public works, and so that's no longer in the department. The creation of an economic website. One thing that many people have asked about, I know Councilman Short has called me several times, and some of the other council members, they talked about, is having an economic website where people can go to off of our main website and look. So we budget around $1,500-1,800 what we're asking for, and we hope to have something like that going. I'm not going to go into those websites. And then we also created a new line item in this year's budget. If you remember, we did not have this position in the current budget. When I proposed the 14-15 stand budget, we didn't anticipate this position being created. So we went almost 6 months of not having an economic development budget. So trainings, brochures, information that we need to help communicate to the public, we didn't have. So the line item was created, 8901, that has about $2,500 in it. And when we had the meeting, the budget meeting with the council, we did show them what we anticipated and what it looked like. Mayor spoke, touched on this, the gateway crossings. This is actually a picture from today. When we started this project 4 years ago, as the mayor just spoke about, there was a lot of people that didn't think this thing would happen. We didn't think it would happen. There was times, Randy, I know I just saw Randy laugh, because there was times, Randy's been an instrumental part, him and Jeff Farmer, on keeping this thing alive. There was times when the developer, Nick Morocco, would call me, and I almost didn't want to answer his phone, because you go 4 years and speaking with somebody and nothing ever happens, you just don't think it's going to come. We talk about teamwork, we talk about working together. This project would not have happened, and let me just give you an example of what teamwork is. State representatives, our Senator Dennis Perry. We met with Dean Schmore, Representative Moore, and Jeff Greer. The mayor and I went to Frankfurt, had a meeting with the chief of staff because we could not get a red light or an intersection light where we needed one to make this project happen. So with the teamwork that we had, we were able to get that done. This project has went through 2 administrations. Went through my administration, went through the council at that time, and then it went on to this administration and the council that we have today. So 2 administrations and 2 councils had to make a decision on whether or not this project was viable. They committed over $1.1 million to see this project through. So now you see the teamwork that's being built. You have 2 commitments from 2 different administrations. You have state representatives, you have the senator that's working hard to ensure that this project gets off the ground here in Radcliff. And so without that, you would not have seen this project. Now, people ask, why did the city invest $1.1 million for Walmart? Now I want you all to leave here and say, they didn't invest $1.1 million for Walmart. What we invested was $1.1 million in the development that's coming to Radcliff. Walmart happened to be the anchor that's helping driving that. And I'll touch on some of those numbers. As you can see, this project has the potential of being a $62 million project. The mayor touched on the possibility of the medical plaza, the theater, the retail, the restaurants. The Walmart project is going to be 42,000 square feet. They're going to have annual sales of $30 million and a traffic count of at least 20,000 per week, and will create over 110 jobs. You look at the Veterans Nursing Center, for instance, which I'll go back to in a second. You look at the potential opportunities that this community has in road networks. Walmart is the key that we needed to be the anchor to bring these projects in. And so once all this happens, I think, Mayor, we anticipated it was going to be back in March, I believe, the closing of this. Then it went to April, and then it went to May. And so once you get to that point, you're like, gosh, it's going to happen. A lot of people doubted it until they seen the dirt move. And now that the dirt is moving, I was out there Saturday, and I was talking to the mayor this morning when we were out there about the groundbreaking. I had 3 people from Hampton Inn come over while we were working on that site to get it ready for Thursday, and that's what was going on. They wasn't from here, they were from out of town. but they saw movement, they saw action, and that's what drives economic development. When people start seeing growth, they want to be a part of it. So we're very fortunate to have that, and it took a team to make it happen. Let me go back. Mayor touched real quick. I think you saw my PowerPoint before I got up here. Boundary Oak, as you all know, that's a big deal. Mayor touched on the numbers. I won't get into too much of this, but I can tell you that there's excitement built around this. There's an opportunity here for the city of Radcliff to be on the map. It'll help put us on the map. And what I'm hearing right now from the development group that's working on this is that they love the fact that there's a distillery all of a sudden that popped up. Now, people ask the questions, and Randy remembers this. Back in November, Randy and I had met with Jeff. We were having lunch, and we thought it might be a great idea to put them in the U.S. CAP building that's located up in Mill Pond, the old distribution center. And of course, I didn't know how big he was at the time. I didn't know how big Brent's operation was. And so then that, of course, didn't happen. And then we had the transition between the two administrations. And then I got appointed back to this position, and Randy and I and Jeff met again. And I said, well, what about the Challenger Center? You think you'd be interested there? And at the time, he said, well, I don't know. Several weeks went by, and he calls me and says, Brent would like to have a meeting which is would put us in February, and Brent would like to have a meeting up at the Challenger Center. So I called the mayor, said, Mayor, I'm going to meet this guy, would you go with me? We went up there, and that's how quick it happened. This wasn't something that was a plan of this development. This wasn't something that we did. It was something that just happened. But what you got to remember is, how did it happen? There's several council people that are sitting here today that remembers when I approached you at budget time and said, hey, can we pay off almost $1 million, $983,000. And at the time, a lot of people said, what are you thinking? What are you doing? Why are you spending this kind of money to pay off the Challenger Learning Center? Well, the issue was Challenger Learning Center bond stipulated what we were allowed to do with that building. We were paying more in interest than what we were getting back with that money sitting in the bank. So with the council's approval and the foresight to know that something good could happen there eventually, we made that happen. And so that's what my message to you all with that is, when you see the council doing certain things, or when you see the council making decisions, the public doesn't always know everything that's going on. As much as Judah would love to know everything that's going on, sometimes they do things because they know what the future's going to bring. And sometimes they have to make tough decisions, and the tough decisions you all might not like. But for economic development, we can't stand at the podium and tell you every little thing that's going to happen. I think Dennis would probably agree with that there was a group that came in probably March, April. Randy can verify this because he knows the owner of the property. They made them take down all the real estate signs before they would even look at the property. Is that right, Randy? And so I can't stand up here and say, hey, guess what's coming to Radcliff? Because they don't want anybody to know they're even looking. That's how they operate. Randy, am I wrong? That's the way they are. So guys, sometimes when you don't see stuff, you see the council make a decision like they did on the Challenger Center. Look where we're at today. We have the opportunity to bring 30, 40, 50, 60,000 people to Radcliff over the next several years. And it's a great opportunity. So I'm going to leave you with that. Mary, did I do okay on that? Thank you. Veterans Nursing Center. The Veterans Nursing Center, Terry, you probably saw this picture because I took it from your Facebook page. I didn't have a picture. So the Veteran Nursing Center is scheduled to be open. Mayor worked on this probably back in 2000. We'll say 99, it's pretty close. But they had to acquire the land to make this happen. Again, this is one of those deals that in 19 or 2000, they worked with Corps of Engineers as a legislator to acquire land that we now have a veteran center that's going to be located on. It's a very great thing. As the mayor said numerous times, I've heard him say it, people that worked that hard back then to get this will no longer be mentioned. It'll be the people holding the shovels that may not have anything to do with it, but that's part of the game. That's how things work. Let me go to the numbers again. The project alone, if you put Walmart, and I'm talking about this year, if you put Walmart and you put the Veterans Nursing Center together, that'll be 300 plus jobs that'll be created in the city of Radcliff. That's a big deal. And to Chris Yates, I know you'll appreciate what I'm getting ready to say, that's probably anywhere from $250,000 to $300,000 in extra taxes, occupational taxes, that will be brought into the city. You like that, Chris? You're welcome. Let's talk about employers in the city. Who do you think is the largest employer? Largest employer, let me say in Hardin County. Let me do it that way.
The hospitals.
School system. Fort Knox.
Fort Knox. Well, you can't see it up there, and I guess it's cut off. Fort Knox has 20,000, according to this is a pretty recent study, got it from Rick Gaines, 20,391. Hardin County School System Center Parent is number 2 at 2629. Hardin Memorial Hospital, somebody said Hardin Memorial was 20,054. Let me jump down here, I'm gonna jump to Cardinal Health. At this time, I think they're about 400 now. Is that right, Chris? I know your wife works there, about 400 or so. They're showing about 389. Lincoln Trail Behavior Health, which is in Radcliff, is about 225. But these are the top 20 in Hardin County. One thing that we did, that we noticed, and the mayor and I spoke about this, as mayor, when I was mayor, I didn't have an economic person. The mayor didn't have a chairman, as a chairman, didn't have an economic person. So the person that was left doing that was me. And I think the mayor will tell you that you get everything coming at you, from the yard that's not mowed, to the dog that's barking, the fence problem. The council members hear the same thing. They come in, they want to fix things. And so not to be able, or not to have this position, I don't know how I did it. To be honest with you, I don't know how I operated with that.
Super guy.
But truthfully, this position is much needed. And the reason is, you look at the little things like this. In every demographic number that we share with the city, or when we go out and we try to recruit, we talk about one thing. We talk about Radcliff. We don't talk about the fact that Hardin Memorial Hospital, who's just down the road, has over 2,000 employees. How far off my number, Roy? Pretty close? Okay. We don't talk about the factories like Amberg that has 1,600 employees. We don't talk about the school systems that have 2,629 people. We don't talk about those things that we have that are surrounding us. But guess who does? Elizabethtown. They share a regional aspect where we've always shared just a local aspect. We've catered to two things. We've catered to Radcliff and we've catered to Fort Knox. But we never have touched on the numbers that surround us. When you add those demographic numbers into our numbers, we're having a per capita income of about 69,000. You take those numbers out, we're having a per capita income of about 45. Makes a huge difference. And so when you start adding those numbers and looking at that, and to have somebody that actually can sit here now and focus in on this stuff every day, makes a huge difference. And so as we talk about working for a plan, we talk about moving forward with an economic study, part of what we're going to do as a regionalization is not only just Radcliff, but it's Radcliff Hardin County. If you look at GLI, which is a Louisville chamber, you will see that we are part of the Louisville regional area. They use us in their demographics. And, you know, I guess we add to them, but we need to add to our numbers. And so looking at our future study, when we do, that's one point we're going to get, and that was the purpose of that show. Now, who knows what the major industry or major business is here in Radcliff? Just in Radcliff. Anybody? I'd say that might be number one. It might be just behind Fort Knox. But Cardinal Health is one of our largest employers. These are in no particular order.
Terry Short says he'll.
That's Chris. North Harbor Nursing Rehab, IPAC, Osage. I'm going to talk just real quickly about Osage. I won't go much longer. I'm almost done. Osage, the mayor and I went out and met with Osage. He called you one day. I happened to be on my way into work, and he called and said, hey, guy from Osage has called and I'd like to talk. Well, I immediately turned around and pulled in. I mean, it was almost like he knew exactly where I was at. And so we spoke. And Osage is a very unique company to Radcliff. It's automotive. What they do is they actually take in recyclables, they chip them down, and then they resend them back out. So when you walk in there, it doesn't look like a whole big operation, but once you see what they're actually milling down, it's very impressive. It could be a Ford dash. He had a ton of Ford dashes, I mean crates. They're brand new. And all it is, there could be a centimeter off where it doesn't fit perfect, or it doesn't have the hole in the right spot. Well, here's a local guy who invested here. He owns one here and one in San Antonio. That is an automotive manufacturer that sends this recycled material back and creates a recyclable where that dash is now maybe in your car or it's in another car. He had a ton of Toyota bumpers that he's chopped up and milled down. How many of y'all ever drove past that on Wilson Road and wonder what is Osage? See, those are the things that I didn't do, that we haven't done in the past, is showcase these businesses like IPAC and what they do, or what Osage does. The guys that really nobody knows about that we should be showcasing in our community that we haven't done. We're working on those things, and hopefully with the videos that the mayor is probably going to be working on this week, we'll know. I peeked the council, now I want to know what videos. I see Terry. Mill Pond Business Center, the mayor pretty much touched on it. We talked about the Build Ready program. I won't go into too much detail with that. Several of the council people brought up a very good point that we want to make sure that this thing is marketed, that it's, I know Councilman Palmer was one that said, you know, look, when we do this, we want to make sure that we focus in on, let's build the site, let's do what we need to do, but let's not forget that it's there. How are we going to market this? I know Kim and Terry, both y'all have said, you know, let's make sure that we have a real estate person, a global, somebody that has a global reach, an international reach, that's going to market the site and share what this community has. Stan and I have talked several times about the branding issue. How are we branding Mill Pond Business Center? Those issues are things that we have to look at. Those are things that we haven't done. I mean, literally have not done. We've had a park sit there, Mayor, for 15 years. And so, you know, when you do that and you start marketing, you start selling, you start branding your product, we've had a lot of interest over the past past 3 or 4 months. Some hiccups have happened, but we think that we have a great opportunity there. Real quick, I'm going to talk about the economic plan study. Back in March, we did a community listening session to get feedback from the community about what we need to do to help move Radcliff economy forward. Currently, as the mayor mentioned, we are working with Lincoln Trail Ag with Lawrence to receive a grant to help fund some of this. Advantage Louisville, I don't know if you all have ever looked at that plan. Advantage Louisville is a regional impact study commissioned by the Greater Louisville Inc. That study was done by a company called Market Street. I'm not going to show you the video because it's about 2 or 3 minutes long, but I know the council members did see it. And it's basically doing exactly what we wanted to do. What's our today goal? What's our 5-year goal? And how do we get there? Market Street is a major player in the game. They're a very great consultant group. They do about 160 cities across the United States. They do big cities like Dallas, Nashville, Louisville. I can't remember which one's on that list. But they've also done cities like Hopkinsville. In fact, at the 20+ meeting that we were just at, I had the opportunity to actually sit down with the mayor and talk a little bit about their study that they did. They've done 3 of them. When they did the first one back in 10 years ago, so whatever, 2004, it was about $80,000 when they did theirs. So you look at anywhere from $100,000 to $120,000 to do a study, and you know, these cities are doing them. It's something that I think that the city want to look at to see what our goals and plans are, and so to get to that point, we have to fund it. And so if the grant comes through, which we feel pretty good about, we will work towards that. And I can tell you that, and I'll say this because he gave me nice compliments, when we went up to Frankfurt, I've been to Frankfurt, the way I came with the Build Ready program is the mayor said, look, I want you to go to Frankfurt, this is who I want you to see, this is who I want you to talk to. I said, okay, called up there, did what I needed to do, and I came back with a plan for the Build Ready program. The Build Ready program started back middle September 2014. Very new program, just started. As we talked about in the work session, there is no date on it because it literally just taken off the ground. I know that there's one Build Ready site that's already been taken, and that's one there in Madisonville, I believe. Where's it, Wyatt?
That's exit 77 on Western
Kentucky Parkway. And so,
you get to Central City.
and basically what the Build Ready program is, you go in, you put a pad down. It's not a concrete pad. It's a certified pad of dirt that's compacted, that's ready to go, ready for construction. You're taking about 3 or 4 months off the build construction time. And so we're considering building about 150,000 square foot pad. You can figure about $1 a foot. That's engineering, that's everything that goes with it, the concept, the bid process, everything that goes with that program is part of that 150,000. And so the mayor and I have been several times to Frankfurt, and I can literally tell you that when we walk through those hallways, all I keep hearing, and I think Senator Parrott, Dean, you were with us, is Colonel Weaver. Colonel Weaver, what are you doing, Colonel Weaver? And I said, damn it, we gotta go. We ain't got time, we gotta be. So it's been a very great experience over the last 5 months to have Colonel Weaver go with me to Frankfurt, because literally when you know the people in Frankfurt to help you get these doors open, having a connection with our senators, having a connection with Dean, who I want to compliment Dean, being a very aggressive freshman this year, getting on very good committees. It makes a big difference. And so Representative Jeff Greer, I won't leave him out even though he walked out on my speech. But I can tell you that, you know, having great council people as well, it started off pretty rocky. I will say that I think the best meeting you all had was probably this last budget session. Probably one of the most productive meetings, and I want to congratulate you all on that. I think that Judah missed a hell of a meeting positive messages about that meeting. So I just want to congratulate you all on your budget, congratulate you all on everything you all have done, and I'll sit down now and have questions. Thank you all.
Open it up for questions for the mayor and for the president.
I have a question. Taking up the economic director. A while back, we talked about the fact that the fastest way to get good jobs is by working with the businesses that we already have. Job creators, we have yet the 9 top employers in the city. What are we doing in terms of building a relationship with those people, individual relationship with those people, so that we can help them actually expand their business as a way to jumpstart creation of jobs in our city?
Want me to answer that?
Whoever has the answer.
Could you briefly repeat the?
Terry basically asked, I know that we're working towards new business, I'm going to paraphrase, tell me if I'm wrong. We're working towards new business, but what are we doing to ensure that the local businesses are maintaining and being stable?
Especially those 9 large employers that you mentioned, they're just where the job growth is probably at the fastest.
Yep.
Faster than everything else.
I think one of the things that the mayor and I did, and several of them we took photos with, some of them we didn't. One of the first places that I took the mayor when he became mayor was IPAC. We toured with IPAC, we toured the facility. I wanted him to not only realize, but get to meet the general manager of IPAC and talk to him about what they do there, what their growth opportunities are, what they're looking about doing. In fact, IPAC is one of those that we were trying to court to get, which they're not, I can say it now, to try to get them to move to that site. They do a lot of work there, and the problem at that time was the stuff, the Toyota had just gone through the change with the Camry, and so all their new products were coming in, and they couldn't stop production in the middle of their high season and then try to move the whole facility to another season. We've had meetings probably twice already now with Hardin. We've had a meeting with their new guy that's kind of really not new, he's been there about a year, I guess. I've talked with Standard Register myself personally twice. I'm trying to think of that. Osage, another example. I think on my part, we do reach out to those people. We have conversations with those people often. I think the major thing that I hear about is how do you help me with my taxes? People don't like my taxes. They don't like stormwater fee. There's a lot of those fees people talk about that they don't care much of. But I think once you see the budget and you know what we operate with, Owensboro, I know Terry, you went there. Owensboro, anybody that knows about Owensboro knows that they did a revamp of their downtown. And what they did was they earmarked occupational tax and insurance premium tax. They actually raised it, earmarked the addition, and then put that towards the bond to help revitalize their downtown. Well, it's hard for us to do that because I think we're capped on our insurance premium tax. We're at 2%, which is the highest in the area for occupational tax. And so when you look at those things, you reduce those, say we cut it in half, well, that's going to cut our funding. So where do we make up for it? Well, the way you make up for it, Councilman Short, of course, as you know, is you bring $300,000 worth of occupational tax back in your community with places like Walmart, places like the Veterans Nursing Center. You have to grow your economy before you can, of course, grow your businesses.
Well, that's one point. That's where the fastest way to add jobs will be from the people who already have jobs.
Now, IPAC asked us to do something for them. I don't know if it will be helpful this fall or not. But they make these components for Toyota, and they've now added Lexus to that since they're going to be building Lexus there. And they asked us if we could help at the state to see if they could get some contracts with Ford because they have nothing there now. And the argument is that Ford gets a lot of incentive from the state of Kentucky, and they ought to do some business with Kentucky-based locals. So we're still working that. I don't know where to go. But when we go to talk to people like this, they ask us to do things and we try to accommodate them as best we can.
I have a comment as well as a little follow-up with that. So my comment is on the nursing home. I think that the nursing home will bring up a lot of people in the area. A lot of families are coming to visit people in the nursing home. And if you think about where they would come from, most likely they're going to come off at 65, which would give them, the offer would be at this end where you're reducing us from companies. I think that'd be great, plus for your hotels, if they say we're like, they're gonna be looking for a close hotel. The question that Terry asked is actually something that has always bothered me. I know that those of you who get a cell phone or a dish network or DirecTV, you have the same problem that Terry just said. You don't get anything nice unless you're a new customer. I wish our state economic development thought a little bit outside the box, and our cities and counties could do that too, and maybe have incentives for companies after they've been here for a while. It's nice to give them something that they're here, but you know, after maybe 25 years you've been there, maybe you get a 10% reduction on your property tax. All right, so I've always thought about something like that, and I know if I'm around in state government long enough, that's something that I'm gonna see how they could work in the state government. I think it could really work in the, you know, it's really most of that is at your county level, at your county or with your city or property taxes, to have some incentives. That way that, and maybe it would be tied to adding employment. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you could do it, but could incentivize those companies that have made an investment, stay in your community as well as adding employees.
Some of that is available now if you ask more.
From the state? Yes, oh yes, definitely is. You have to lay at least, I think it's 50 for, I think it's mine. Well, if you add an employee now, I mean, there's a lot of things out there that we talked about some of this before. You can add one employee and get on-the-job training, like up to $5,000 that they'll pay for adding an employee. If you hire a veteran, they've been out of work so long, you can get a big incentive from the state. But I'm talking about something like an economic development package that counties use to draw, that states use to draw someone to the area. Talking more along those lines.
Like you have a question.
You have a question?
I do. This kind of goes into the economic development on a core level. At this time, do we know how many businesses are in the city, right? Small businesses?
Yes, I got that, off the top of my head, I don't.
300, 400,
No, it's,
200?
God, what did I say?
Well, since
The Chance, because I talked to Chance about this, he said sometimes the number's hard to track, because you don't have,
who has licenses in the city?
we can give the license number, but then sometimes you have home occupation, where you have people that do stuff out of their house. Some of those stuff aren't counted everywhere because the license is different.
Well, I know, and actually, in my process, there was a certain point where we didn't have to have a business license, we operated at home, and I checked for like, every 2 or 3 weeks, make sure we was okay. And so obviously, we're at the point where we need to do that now. So I know there's unregistered, but how about the registered? Do you have access to that?
I have emailed you that, I don't think I can tell something like that.
But, and it goes back really to my question back at the economic listening session. Can we put anything into place for businesses that have 5 to 10 employees, that if they were to expand by 1 or 2 employees, an incentive for them? And if you had just 100 businesses that could add 1 or 2 people per company, they had an incentive to do that. Kind of like what Dean and I have been talking about as far as on the state level, an incentive, on the job training incentive. If we had that, if you had 100 businesses and they could add just 2 employees, that's 200 new jobs. I mean, it's not a Walmart, but it's the growth across the whole, it brings the whole community together. Is there anything that we can do in the city, something similar to like Cardinal Health incentives with the occupational tax? Is there anything that we can do that? Is there anything within your power as the executive branch that can do that?
The only thing that I can think of would be occupational tax. And since occupational tax used to be, 1%, it was raised to 2% because of the insurance fiasco, maybe it's a possibility to, if you had new employees, to go to 1% for a certain period of time instead of the 2. And my immediately thinking about that is 1% of 100 employees is a whole lot better than 2% of nobody.
Right.
So, yeah, anytime you ask questions like this, it starts our brains to working on what can we do.
Usually in the past, the incentives have always been done based on somebody coming in and asking prior to them opening. I guess it was just us 3 and Barbara, but I don't know, but currently on council, that dealt with the same issue with a business that was here existing, where they had asked for some relief. The relief was about, I think, $4,500 at the time, was an existing business that was having some issues. There were internal issues that we were dealing with while we couldn't do it, but that scenario played out back then. What could we do for existing businesses? The problem, and it goes back to what Dean had asked, the problem is when you have a 10-year budget set a certain way, like ours is at 11.6 million, and it's based on every dime and nickel that you take in, and then all of a sudden you say, okay, after 10 years, we're gonna revert back. And when you revert back, just like in our own spending in our home, if you have an customer making 50,000 and then you make 20,000 now, something has to go. And so that's where the issue is. When the economy grows, that's when the luxuries can come in.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not talking about the league.
No, but I mean,
Oh,
it's-
for growth.
yeah, for growth, what I'm saying is kind of what the dean was saying. We set our budget for a certain amount of income. Cardinal Health, or I use the Walmart project, the 1.1 million that we've actually bonded, if nothing else came to that site, it would take us about 5.5 years to generate that money back. So we know after 5 years, now Walmart becomes a profitable venture, because we gotta pay ourselves back. When you have the smaller businesses come in, you say, okay, let's give them back a 1% occupational tax. If that employee's only making $10 an hour, that incentive back to that owner is not gonna pay for him. It's not enough incentive for him to add 1 or 2 employees, it's costing him more in the long run rather than get that 1% back. So there's not a whole, that's why it's hard to do that to small business. Now, if you add 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 employees, then that money starts becoming a little bit greater, which adds. When you had an employee that had, I don't want to say 60 employees, I think at the time, that we were talking about, we dealt with, you're talking about $4,500. It wasn't enough to sustain the level of incentive to keep this business up. See, that's the issue. So then you look at the property taxes, well, we're governed by the state, and we can actually do the property tax. I can't waive the property tax against the law. So when you start looking at that, what incentives does the city actually have other than cash value? And, how much money can we actually loan out or bond? That's the question. We don't have that capability, it's such a small business.
Well, now, what kind of follow-up? With regards, you say the incentive that went into the Walmart, and it takes 5, not only have to 5 years to return back. If you were able to set aside another funds to invest in small business, kind of like a small business pool, that would be a reoccurring pool, that maybe small business owners could borrow against a lower interest rate, and pay back into that, and they could create a profit themselves. And instead of, waiting for 5 years to get that back, you actually have small business owners paying into that, hopefully paying off earlier as business succeeds. Something, just kind of how to kickstart the development, the gateway development, help kickstart small businesses. I'm thinking about the businesses that are on the line and say, okay, I can be on 31W anywhere. Would I want to be in Elizabethtown, or would I want to be near the gateway center?
Yeah, the state program is similar to that, and I think the problem we have is we can't compete against local banks. We can't be a first lender. We have to be a second if we're going to do something like that. Similar to the state, I think Dean probably knows that program. The state will piggyback off an existing loan, but they can't be the loanee, if that makes sense. And so, looking at programs like that, which I know we talked about before, the council has mentioned, how do we offer incentives? I think once you see our budget, and we're nickel and diming whether or not we can buy 5 cruisers or 6 cruisers, or if we're gonna give raises here or there, it becomes very hard from an economic standpoint for me to go to the mayor and council and say, look, you need to cut this service and then do this service, and then they say, well, hold on, we don't have enough money. So we don't have a big enough pool to allow people to bond money from us. We would have to borrow it, and let's say we borrow 1.1 million, we extend it out over 5 years, we're probably talking about $120,000 a year payment. 8 years.
So are we in that, are we on the backside of that, are we saying that we can't have small businesses do that?
It'd be hard. I mean, when you say incentivize small business, you gotta find a way to fund it. That's the main thing. It's not that we don't want to do it, it's how do you fund it? I mean, that's initially the problem, funding.
I think you also have to look at our budget, which is 11.6 million, and then compare that to a city of equal size just south of here, that's a $26 billion budget. And of course, they have all the occupational taxes that come from so many different directions. We don't have, that's why it's so important for us to improve the quality of life through what we're doing, so that we can improve the traffic count, so that other businesses will come here. And I think what we're primarily going to look at is distribution center and light industry. And I think that the Economic Development Authority passed up a couple of excellent opportunities when the city had no control. You had a local trucking company that did all the trucking for a big shoe group. That is a shoe firm. And he wanted to locate in Mill Pond, and he had 40 employees. It wasn't what the Economic Development Authority was looking for at the time. So they turned him down, and he went to Evansville. I think he now has 240 employees. So we were going to do something like that now. And I don't think, and I don't even know who was on the authority at the time. They didn't look as far forward as I think they should. And that's why, after looking at all the online research, I decided that if I could convince the board to do so, we would dissolve the Economic Development Authority and put this back in the hands of the city, where there is a higher authority.
Actually, I have like 3 questions and comments, but I'll forego the other 2 for right now. You sort of just mentioned thinking out the box or thinking forward on different businesses. Some of the businesses I think that we could have probably taken advantage of, or opportunities we might have taken advantage of, have been things such as becoming a technology hub in Radcliff. That was something I mentioned to Mayor Inyard years ago. And unfortunately, things didn't happen. Cardinal Health was the only technological business, I believe, that came in, a major one. But I think that there should be more opportunities in Radcliff for those types of businesses, since manufacturing is not one of our biggest options. Also, just like, Elizabethtown just picked up that Hall of Fame. That's going to be a great opportunity for them. It's going to increase their tourism and everything else down there. Hopefully, and I've mentioned this before to other people, maybe we might have an opportunity to attract someone's Hall of Fame or museum or something to this town to draw in more tourists. And finally, a sports area. There's a town up in Ohio called Geneva. Geneva has around it has a little over 6,000 residents. Geneva, Ohio is one of the major areas in not only the United States, but also the world for athletic events. They built an indoor facility up in Geneva. Right now, you have a lot of NCAA Division I, II, III, and NAIA schools which hold their conference championships in their indoor facility. They also host the NCAA Division I and Division II national championships every year. And they've also expanded into other areas that you can, other sports you can do indoor in their facility. And they also have cross country out there. According to research, they started out with a 450,000 square foot indoor facility. Now it's 750,000. And they started back in 2008. Great opportunity for them. That's the major, they got I think they're sitting, an hour outside of Cleveland. And, something about being on a winery trail or something, but similar concourse to what we have. They sit off of I-90 and off of another major road, just like we do with I-65 and 31W. I think that could be an opportunity for us if we had the land, we had someone who would want to develop and do something like that, because frankly, in the state of Kentucky, Kentucky has 2 indoor track and field facilities. One of them is at University of Kentucky. The other one is an old renovated grocery store in Mason County, Kentucky. The Mason County facility is, if you're a high school or middle school in the state of Kentucky, and you want to run indoor, you go to Mason County. University of Kentucky has 2 meets that high schools in Kentucky can compete in, actually one. The other one is for elite athletes from around the country. And that's also one of the major issues for track and field in this state, is that we only have that, and UK is very stingy with their facilities. And so we have college conferences based in Kentucky that want to have indoor facility to hold their championships, but they can't do it, so they don't, they have to go elsewhere, or they can't have a formal indoor track and field offering in their conferences because there's nowhere in Kentucky to do that. I think we might have that opportunity.
I am really puzzled as to how a city of 6,000 people funded what you just talked about. I mean, we're a city of about 20,000, and I have no idea where we would get the kind of funding to do anything comparable to that. Just looking at the budget that we have and the power that we have to bond, I don't know how that could be done. But what I have in my own head that I would like to see here is an indoor soccer facility. Because I have grandkids in Danville that go to Louisville for indoor soccer, and I have grandkids in Bowling Green that go to Louisville for indoor soccer. And soccer is a year-round sport, and they play soccer all night long. So there is something here. If we had a way of funding it, that's the thing that I would try to sell to the city council. And that's one of the reasons why I am very interested in tourism dollars, not just coming from the room tax, but tourism dollars, and I think we have the potential here to get tourism dollars from a restaurant tax. And that could be as much as $500,000 a year. And if I'm looking at the Kentucky Revised Statutes, currently, it appears to me that all of the room tax and all of the restaurant tax would come to the city of Radcliff in our budget process and would be set aside for tourism only. It would be fenced for that. But the Tourism Commission would come to the city council at budget time, give a budget to the city council, and say, this is what we plan to do for the next year. And if they needed $200,000 to do that, if at the end of the fiscal year they had not spent all of that, then the remainder of it would roll over to their next fiscal year budget. And if I read this correctly, the city of Radcliff can use tourism dollars to do such things as sports parks. I think I read all of that in the Kentucky Revised Statutes as they exist today, and that's why I say that we need to really look at this, and the city council and the mayor and everybody and the finance director, we all need to look at it and see what direction we need to go.
Yeah. Go ahead. I want to remind you all that on Thursday, June 18th.
What's that?
I'm wrapping it up.
Oh, go right ahead.
Do we have any more questions? Did you have, I know you raised your hand.
Do you have anything, well, I know from listening to you tonight and watching the council meetings that a lot of your contacts are really sensitive, but is there anything brewing for northern part of the city?
You talking about like Red Mar, that area?
Yeah.
Yeah. Red Mar, it's a hard sell. The whole north end right now, and I'm gonna say probably from the bridge, to Knox Boulevard is a hard sell. Right now, I got my department working on something that I don't want to say here because I haven't talked to the council or mayor about it yet, that I'm doing with that. The problem with it's just market driven. Right now, Fort Knox, we all know, is on decline. That area is an older part of town. A lot of times, it's hard to convince someone to go in and tear something down and rebuild it back up. I've talked to several of the mayor, several of the council members about different ideas for the north end. The north end is just a hard sell, it's market driven. And right now, the market is not saying that that's a high-end area. You have the gate closed at 6 p.m. I was surprised who I was talking with today. I was actually talking with somebody this afternoon about that.
Is there any progress on changing that?
And let the mayor know the mayor is going to touch base on that. Yeah.
You know, there is an association called the Association of Defense Communities. And they met about 2 months ago.
Yes.
And they're meeting again in DC. And I've had J.J. Duvall join that association. And we're sending him to DC for that association meeting. And the reason we're doing that is because defense communities all over the nation have found ways to work with the defense institution that's close to them to do a lot of things that is thinking outside the box. And I have been in discussion with Fort Knox to do such things as take the fence that's on the outside of Patton Museum and move it behind it and open that up where you can come straight to that off of 31W, which adds another tourist attraction that is more marketable than it is now. And for security reasons, Fort Knox says they can't do that. I want JJ, when he goes to DC, to proceed if there's anything similar to that that's being done at another military base anywhere in the United States. And if there is, there's a precedent for doing that. And if there's a precedent for a community working with gate guards in order to open a gate like Wilson Road, I want to know where that is, so we can piggyback off of that and do something. I would also tell you that talking to the Undersecretary of Defense for installations, when she was here about 3 weeks ago, she said to us that for Fort Knox, probably the best thing that could happen to you is another base realignment closure. And the reason she was saying that is because she had just had the opportunity to look at solar energy produced at Fort Knox, gas produced at Fort Knox, geothermal that's produced here, and Fort Knox went off the grid, and they proved to the Undersecretary that Fort Knox is energy independent and could, if everything else failed around here, Fort Knox could continue moving. They also proved to her that we have an unending supply of fresh water at Fort Knox. And if you look at all of the things that need to happen at an installation for you to remain open and gain other missions, Fort Knox has every one of those. And since the listening session in January of this year down at the Performing Arts Center, I think we are getting more attention than we have had in the past. And the core committee, which lobbies for Fort Knox all the time, thinks that, and so does the Association of United States Army. And the core committee is the loudest voice. And I don't know if any of you know Jim Fugate or not, but he is now the chair of that. And he is one very effective person. And so I think we look at all of that, and I don't say that we need to be dependent on Fort Knox, but I say that our economy will be affected by what happens to Fort Knox for as long as Fort Knox is there. We just need to do other things that draws us away from as much dependency as we've had on it in the past. That come anywhere close to answering your question?
Yeah.
That's good, because I forgot what your question was.
Well, it's about new businesses in the northern end of the city. It seems like, so much is going on south and.
That's because, as JJ stated, nobody wants to go there. And one of the reasons they don't want to go there is because it's in a state of disrepair.
Right.
One of the things that the city council has talked about, and we haven't decided whether we want to do this or not, is have an ordinance that puts a whole lot more restrictions or fines people with a much heavier fine, and put some teeth in the ordinances that we have that force people to clean up what's along 31W, because it's not a very impressive corridor right now.
Well, in the sessions that we had last fall with all of the candidates for city council and mayor, it seemed like, that was hit on with so many of them, the appearance of those businesses where, I think they tend to lay blame on the people that were in office, but it's not people's fault that's in office, it's the owners of that property that, don't maintain it and don't do things to improve its appearance.
After listening to all of the promises made by potential candidates for city council, And now being the mayor and working with 6 city councilmen and, or 6 city, 5 and 1, I find that some of the promises that were made by some of the people, those people didn't take into consideration that they had to work with the mayor and 5 other councilmen when they made the promises. So there's a lot of things that people talk about when they're running that they just have to realize that if they get the position, there's a whole lot of other people to work with.
Right, and there are budgets to work with also.
Yeah, that's
And
one of the biggies.
ordinances.
And then there's the Good Old Boys Network to work with. And every time we try to pass ordinances to bring the level of appearance up in this city, we get pushback because we don't want to upset the establishment.
Right,
And every ordinance we've ever brought up since I've been on the council, I don't want to grandfather. The mayor got upset because somebody put up 4x4 and some cardboard and called it a sign. And he said, let's change the sign ordinance. The only problem with that was I couldn't get the rest of the council, all the council, to not grandfather. We either got to clean up that north end or we're going to have everything going south.
right,
And Fort Knox has got to come through that north end and get to the south.
right.
So now what needs to happen is we need to set ordinances that will bring business up, that will cause business to revitalize. We need to incentivize revitalization. But if I had to bring a new business in, the place I get my hair cut, I wouldn't want to put my doghouse next to it. And I had to scream and kick and cry and threaten to not let the fire department in my church to inspect until they inspect that barber shop. And if I wouldn't inspect that barber shop, they needed to close it down. But I believe the reason it's not closed down because one of the good old boys owned it. So I'm going to go ahead and say the peak elephant in the room. We want to change the north end. We're going to have to start ruffling some feathers, and it's going to be some people that's been here for a long time. And we'll have to hold them accountable for beautifying that area. So
I agree.
I will support anybody that will support me in saying, you know what, let's change the ordinances. Let's make those businesses come up. Let's take some of the surplus in the years to come because of the good times on the south end. Let's incentivize revitalization of the north end. But we're going to do something the way our city looks because we're never going to get revitalization on the south end until we change the appearance of the south.
That's right.
I would say to that I am an old boy, but I'm not a good old boy. And I agree with Councilman Palmer.
Yep.
And I am willing to make the ordinances as strong as the city council will allow them to be, because the network that you're talking about has been in charge too long, and it does not bother me at all to change that. I think it needs to be changed, and I'm with you, buddy. I'm with you.
Well, I think JJ touched on that. When you were talking about on the houses in Radcliff too, the ones that are not being mowed, not being maintained, that gets into that also, right?
But let me tell you just how difficult that is. Because I told JJ, go out on Hill Street to this house and find out how we can tear it down. Well, it looked easy at first, but we now think that if we take possession of that house from the people who inherited from a son who died, that there may be as much as a $50,000 loan on it, and as soon as the city assumes responsibility for that, to tear it down and have a $10,000 lot, we would be responsible for a $50,000 loan. And forcing people to cut their grass is one of the most frustrating things that I have been dealing with. It's,
Just real quick, Mayor, on
Yeah.
that. I know one and maybe even two organizations, nonprofits, that actually do volunteer grass cutting. What if we united, you remember this, don't you?
I was thinking, give me the number.
Well, what I'm saying is, I think one of the contact may have been prior to you. They contacted the mayor's office on, hey, where are some properties that need cutting, and we'll go out and do that. Now, they may need some access drained by the city. Do that same access, maybe you give the contractor that, once it gets to a certain point, does the city cut the grass? Okay, so maybe we link those nonprofit organizations with those properties, because maybe they are having a hard time. Maybe just they're, I mean, it could be drug addicts, it could be lazy, it could be all of that, but in the end, it affects our city, and hardworking, profitable people have to drive by that. So if you take the nonprofit that are willing to donate to the city, make improvements to the city, and match them, maybe we could delete that problem without going through all the hassle of eminent domain and taking things.
I believe I could legally use them in 5 different places tomorrow. What we have found out with this particular property I'm talking about, that our attorneys tell us, instead of accepting that liability, mow the grass.
The structure is dilapidated.
But most of the ones we're talking about are not occupied.
So does the structure continue to deteriorate?
Oh, yes, oh, yes.
Until it falls in? And-
No, if you take your own home today and you board it up and go to Florida for a year, it's going to deteriorate while you're gone.
Right.
The home needs to be occupied in order to be maintained. So when they're vacant, they just start falling apart.
An example,
So what happens to that property then?
What happens to that property?
I mean, it just continues to, so what happens if it's so bad and they still own it?
Well, the bank owns it. If we determine that there is no money owed on that property, and the family that owns it and doesn't want it will sign it over to us, and we accept no liability, then we can tear it down and sell the lot. And probably make $5,000. But in the process, we use it. But there's a whole lot of ifs in that. And it's a whole lot more difficult than I thought when I said, let's clean this place up.
So what happens when it's falling in?
It just falls in.
And that's
Again, I
not,
went up and looked at one today. It is falling in.
that's not a risk to the community?
what happens is, this is example, we have a certain amount of taxes that they budget for right now, that they're, trying to give this and that. Well, we go out, we tear the one down that he's talking about, let's say it costs us $10,000 to $12,000 to have it taken down, haul material off, all that. We don't own possession of it, so the only thing we can do is put a lien against it. So that's $10,000 out of this current budget that's gone. Then we go out to the property that the mayor and I went and looked at today. That probably cost $15,000, $12,000, $15,000 to take down. Now we're about $22,000, $23,000 in the hole from money they've already budgeted. We literally can go out, like Ed said, we can go to different parts. There's one on 31W that I took compared to about a week and a half ago, that I would really want to push down there just before you get to Knox Boulevard. But you're probably talking $25,000, $30,000. So that money's just not, and then you get to the incentive portion, like what Keith was talking about. Where does that money come from? So you start looking and you start adding all this stuff up. We got blacktop roads.
Yeah.
I mean, when you start looking at the budget and what you have to work with, if you start taking down those houses, Terry, do you remember right behind Dog and stuff, your place? Remember that big apartment complex? There was a 2-story apartment complex that was full of junk. It cost almost $23,000 to take it down. I think the city, after the sale and everything was over with, got like $3,000 or $4,000. So, I mean, that's the risk that you run. The problem is the form of the public, as the mayor just said, of what we're actually, how much it actually costs to get something like that done.
What about holding your owners accountable?
Well, in this case, a lot of these are dilapidated, nobody owns them. The bank owns them,
Is there no way to hold the bank accountable?
You put liens against them, and then until the bank sells that property, you don't get anything.
You have to find the bank first, find out what state it's in. And so you can imagine all that we have to go through just to communicate with the bank.
One more question.
Oh, I had 2 things. One, when you talk about, I think I know the property you're talking about. If you can acquire property that doesn't have any liens, because you don't want to inherit a mortgage against it, but if you can acquire the property without any liens, instead of paying a company to tear the house down, I thought, I may be wrong, but I thought the fire department could use that house for training and burn it, cut off the utilities and burn it as a training instead of paying somebody to come and raise it.
I'll give you an example. You remember the Knox Boulevard where the old Long John Silvers and the
Yes, sir.
check
Yes,
cash?
sir.
We actually burnt that down as a training exercise.
Yeah.
It costs almost $8,000 to do that.
For the city fire
Yeah,
department?
anytime the city's involved, we have to follow every rule. So they'll come in, we have to do a lead check, we have to make sure there's no asbestos, we have to have the shingles removed, all the electric pipes. Everything has to come out of that structure before we can actually go in and burn it.
I wasn't aware of that, and I just thought, they could.
No, it
use
makes sense, but
The
that's.
training, yeah, it would be cheaper that way. And 2,
He said, "Just don't imagine it."
And what that thing is.
I'm not suggesting.
If somebody doesn't keep their lawn mowed, now I could be wrong, I don't know, but I thought the city would go and mow it and then hand them a $25 or $50 bill. And if they didn't pay if they didn't pay the bill for having their grass mowed, then you could put a lien on their property or something. Is that right or wrong?
Going after the money, if you spend $35, costs you $40 to take them to small claims court.
Well, I mean, I thought you get them a bill for mowing their property, do you not? Or not? You just go mow it or?
No, actually, what we have to do is we actually have to go out, and let's say it's your yard, I'm gonna use Chris, let's say it's Chris.
Yeah.
We actually have to give him warning. We have to say, you have 15 days, within 15 days, you have to cut your grass. You'll see a note posted. He doesn't cut it. Then we come back and say, okay, if you don't cut it, we're gonna cut your grass. This is the day we have to give him, it's almost 30 days for that process that we have to go through. Let's say we cut his grass. Let's say it adds up to $100. Well, we take him to court. Well, then we go to court, we gotta get a judgment against him. Then you get a judgment against him, they gotta garnish his wages. And when you garnish his wages, then you don't even know if he's gonna pay.
No, I mean, can you not, if you give him like a ticket or something, or a fine, doesn't he have to go before the judge and pay his fine?
No.
Or go to jail?
No, these are city ordinance fines, they're not KRS's, so they don't fall under the same. All you can basically do is garnish his wages or put a lien against the property if it exceeds a certain amount. And that's the dilemma these guys deal with because they have to follow those rules, in which one that I deal with just yesterday, she wants it done right now, tomorrow. And legally, I just can't go on their property and do that. But these guys are the ones that hear all the complaints because people want it done tomorrow. And until we educate the public on that process, they just don't want to hear it.
I think Bev wants to wrap this up.
Well, Can I say one thing real quick? Yeah.
You had made the comment Radcliff on the north side, but Radcliff Square, or Radcliff Plaza,
It's looking very well.
has a new owner, He's put a lot of effort, a lot of work into that, it looks fine, and I think he probably would like to touch base with you guys, because the sign
He's an
ordinance is
example.
something he's very, concerned about when he starts opening that other side up. He's even working on the other side, not the older side, he's repainting it and
Is
everything.
that the old agency?
It's the movie theater shopping complex.
But it's an example of what an old building could look like if someone puts money into it.
Well, and he's continuing on, so the whole shopping complex is gonna be,
It's an example of some of the benefits of a tornado.
well, and it's also an example of a new owner. He is a new owner.
Well,
So, he had a
tornado
board
problem.
before, well, that helped him a little bit, but yeah,
And just like back there, a lightning strike would take care of some problems for us too.
I'm sure.
You can't create,
You know, the media's there. I don't know.
Paper lightning.
Well, like I said, I had three, but I'll just make one. During JJ's, presentation, I noticed he was talking about a lot of studies and how much money they will cost. Have you thought about, asking one of the universities to do, some of the studies that are needed? Kentucky State University is, besides University of Kentucky, is our only other language. And one of the things that they did in their cooperative extension program is that they did small town economic development studies. And so, do you think that might be something that, now that you know, that you might be willing to approach maybe Kentucky State University or even UK, and asking their land grant program whether or not they can do the studies for you and do it at a lower cost than the others?
We actually had Webster University do one of those for us about 2 years ago. The level of detail that we are asking for, it's hard for them to do that. That's why these consulting firms are out there, and that's, and these cities use them. But I think anything's worth looking into. Basically, I think you might as well. I mean, it doesn't hurt. So, and if we get the grant, we'll probably go the direction of the consultant. Without the grant, I think it's definitely a possibility.
But, like I said, Kentucky, that is what Kentucky, part of what Kentucky State is supposed to be doing. through their land grant program, so.
One quick question, whatever happened with the Winn-Dixie Shopping Center and all, the plans that that owner had for that? And it won't? We're gonna have to wrap up, but one thing I wanted to say was, I was probably the worst guilty of this, where, you know, I watched MSNBC and I watched what was going on around the country, but I didn't pay as much attention to what was going on locally, and I kind of made it my New Year's resolution that I was gonna, you know, start really paying attention to what was going on within our city and county, and I've really been trying to go to city council meetings, the regular meetings, working sessions, and when I can't go, I watch them on TV, and I find it really disappointing. When I first started earlier in the year, there were maybe only a few people in the audience, other than, you know, the people that work for the city that were there to answer questions or whatever, and they are on the Hardin County Ed channel for everyone to watch, but I would, you know, it's amazing what you can learn from going to city council meetings and listening to them, and it would be great if more people attended them and paid attention to the city and what our city councilmen are doing. You know, sometimes they're kind of long and drawn out because they have a lot of things to work through, but it's worth it, you know, to go and listen and see what our councilmen and our mayors do. So, and I'm sure that they would appreciate the support of the citizens of Radcliff. So, if you have a chance, go and listen to them. And Brenda has something to present. Well, we want to thank both of you for being here. Thank both for coming with Mike. It's good to see you here. Thank you for coming.
I thank everyone, everyone who for attending tonight. I'm sure you learned a lot, and there's so much more to learn. We have to support our council and our mayor and economic developer. So we need to do that to move forward in Radcliff. I've been here quite a while. I followed my husband to Fort Knox, and there has been a lot of improvement since we came, but there can be a lot more. And we have a small token for you two to spruce up your office and to remember it's
Is it the same or no?